What was the best moment you've seen where the real world hit a spoiled rich kid? I grew up with rich kids and still keep in touch with a few of them. One guy's father owned the most prestigious law firm in town. He said his life changed the moment he called his father from jail the second time it happened. His father said, "Well, sorry to hear you got arrested. Good luck," then hung up. He said getting locked back into his cell was the singular moment that completely turned his life around. Honestly, this doesn't sound like a super spoiled rich kid though, because the dad knew when to cut him off. It's like, look, you have the services available, but you lost the right to them. You screwed up, kid. Face the consequences. In my mind, that's the exact opposite of spoiled, although maybe it took the dad a while to get there. We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description. Story 2. Somewhat distant relative spent all of his university years and 20s partying hard with a $100 to $120K allowance his rich company-owning father gave him each year. He'd travel the world each year going to Bali, Thailand, Europe, every year Oktoberfest, just rampaging. At 32 or so, he decided to settle in an upscale ski resort area of the US and open a business with his hot gold digger fiancée. When he went to transfer his money to his US bank account, he noticed it only came to a few $1,000s. He angrily asked the bank worker why she hadn't transferred the entire amount, just to be told that was. His father had cut him off without saying anything and he just hadn't noticed. Absolute flatline. Story 3. Rich guy in our college dorm thought he was untouchable because his dad was some NFL player from the 90s and had not blown all of his money yet. He would get freshman girls blackout drunk and then film himself banging them and show all of his buddies the next day or so. Well, one buddy was not as close as he thought and went to the RA, who then went to the campus police, who then went to the real police. It was a fun night watching the parking lot fill up with the bored cops on duty that night and haul his butt out of the dorms while they went and gathered his evidence. Personally, I think this is some of the dumbest behavior you can have. Just acting like you have ownership over someone else in that kind of way is so weird. And also getting freshman girls in particular super drunk and then banging them, that's so screwed up. This guy's making me too mad. I'm gonna move on. Story 4. I had a roommate my freshman year of college that came from an incredibly rich oil family from the Middle East. I remember waking up one morning and going to the kitchen and seeing him try to eat eggs and toast he had just prepared himself. He asked me how I normally prepare fried eggs, because his tasted really crunchy. Turns out he had just cracked the egg whole into the pan and prepared it shell and all. I couldn't stop laughing but felt really bad for the dude. But hey, props to him for trying. He didn't expect everything to get handed to him there. He went out and tried to do something himself, and that's the first step of a long journey. So, big props to him. Story 5. I knew a guy in high school who bragged that he didn't have to pay attention in school because, get this, his grandfather was a vice president of the corporation that supplied the cardboard for cereal boxes for General Mills. Real gravy train, you know. Last I checked, he has since deleted Facebook, he was still working at Best Buy 5 years after high school. Same job he had while at school. Story 6. My best moment was when I got hired by a pair of Woodside, California parents to transition their horrible 18-year-old into the realities of real life, something that evaded both of them. My first action was to take away his platinum, limitless credit cards. He threw a tantrum that lasted several days. Where am I gonna get money? Get a job. My parents will fire you. They didn't. When he realized that boundaries and budgets had been set in stone and that he not only had to pay the bills, the rent, but taxes too, he headed straight to college to wait out the next 4 years. He is still a little jerk, but at least he has a job and an education now. Story 7. One of my college roommates told his parents the trip we were planning that they were paying for was $400 more expensive than it was, so he could buy a really nice bong. In addition, they basically paid for everything he wanted. He had their credit card and ordered food on it at least once daily. He would also make regular $50 purchases off of the card. Long story short, they found out he lied about the cost of the trip. For whatever reason, they still paid for it and let him go. But after the trip, he could not use their card anymore. This dude acted like he lived the hardest life of all time after. But eventually he sucked it up. He actually acts way less entitled now. It ended up having a lasting positive effect for him, even though he won't admit it. Story 8. While working in a casino here in Vegas, a herd of girls came to my window, and one proceeded to tell me about her great birthday party itinerary that her dad had paid for her 18th birthday, with no adult in the party, just a bunch of teenaged girls out in Vegas. None of them could even do anything because they weren't 21. I couldn't even check them into their reservation. They started yelling and screaming at me. I calmly call security, and security tells them they can either go play in the arcade or leave and try to find a hotel off the strip that will take them in without being 21. The anger turns to tears. The security guard is unmoved. Story 9. No joke here. Back in high school, 90s, this kid got a brand new Chevy Camaro. I had an old 80s Pontiac Phoenix that had the straight six. It was by far not a racing car, but this tool was just looking to brag at what he got compared to the busted cars we got. About 2 days later, while we were waiting at a stoplight, this idiot tries to race us as I'm in my car and I pull up with my friends. He does so by revving it really loud and tries to do a burnout. Mind you, the light was red and the roads were not wet. So he managed to get a tiny burnout going, some smoke and whatnot, when his tires did catch traction. He went barreling into the intersection and smashed the car of the wife of one of the very few cops in my small city. Needless to say, that did not work out for him very well. This is peak play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Story 10. A kid from my high school came from a very well-known family that was very well involved in politics. He slacked off in school and was mostly a condescending jerk for years. After graduation, he didn't really do anything, but eventually decided to run for office as he had the same name as his father. He won easily because people didn't realize it was the kid. As a state rep, he posted on Facebook about enjoying his women battered rather than plain, and asking to join the Black Caucus because he likes hip-hop. He also dropped a loaded gun on the floor in the middle of a session after fighting for the right to carry a gun in the state house as a responsible gun owner. He kept getting elected despite these issues because his family was well connected, and he had a dedicated following from the same political groups. After 6 years in office, he gets busted for soliciting from a minor over the internet. When they arrest him for that, they also discover he's been dealing drugs. The worst part is his family's actually super nice and genuinely made the community a better place. But now they have to deal with the issues from him. He was an apple that fell very far from the tree. Story 11. When I was a teenager, my sister and I saw through our windows that there were 2 guys getting into her car. We ran downstairs as fast as possible and caught them in the act. One managed to run away, but the other one froze and didn't run away. He couldn't have been much older than me. My sister called the cops and the kid kept looking at us trying to find a way to escape. My sister said, "Run if you want, my brother will catch you." The cops came and so did his parents. His mom drove a freaking amazing car and the lady looked furious and sad. She was dressed really nice and looked like she was pretty successful. As soon as she got out, she began yelling, "Why? We give you everything. You have everything. Why would you try and steal? Don't we give you enough?" The kid just seemed to shrink and get smaller. I don't get it, frickin' jerk. I hope he turned his life around and began to be around better people. Story 12. Freshman year of college. The guy across the hall from me is a spoiled rich kid from a big southern city. Old money clearly coming out of his butt. A couple weeks into the second semester, he and a buddy found a checkbook on the sidewalk. Stupid jerks decided to write themselves a check and cash it in the bank that the account is in. The teller immediately called the cops and they both got arrested. We talked the night he got arrested and he laughed and said his dad would take care of it and everything would be fine. That weekend, we met his dad as they moved everything out of the dorms since his dumb butt got expelled. Guess daddy didn't take care of it. Oh no. Story 13. Nothing too serious, but I taught at an international school in Africa, and we would take the high school students camping 1 week out of the year. Many of these kids are not used to camping at all and have never even taken public transport. They have full-time drivers to bring them to school and pick them up. Some of them are from very wealthy and politically connected families. Having to set up tents and get dirty, not being able to shower every day and sleep on hard ground is new to them. Some of them do love it, but others are sad, pathetic wretches the entire week. Oh no, I think I'm getting old. I read this post and thought, oh, that builds character. Oh no. Story 14. I went to a very rich, predominantly white Catholic high school. One moment I remember was the wind absolutely being taken out of a girl's sails when I explained to her why our school dominated the area's skiing, golf, and equestrian competitions, but never anything else. For a lot of kids in that school, the moment they learned they were rich was the moment they learned that most girls don't have their own horses. Story 15. For a couple of years in high school, I went to this super expensive American private school in Switzerland. The company my dad worked for paid for almost all of the tuition, so it was an amazing opportunity for me. Most of the kids in this school were either State Department or from American families living in Saudi. Saudi provided expat kids with school up until 10th grade, so you had to go to a school abroad to finish high school. There were, however, a few Saudi kids that were there mostly so that they would be able to speak flawless English to help out their future careers. One of these kids, who I will call the Prince, was somewhere in the line of Saudi succession. But honestly, he was like 1400th in line for the throne or something, not a real contender. But his family was rich. Like, rich in a way that most of us can't even imagine. This school had some rules, like you couldn't have a car as a student even if you were old enough to get a license. This rule was a real buzzkill for the prince, but he made it through the year somehow. Over the summer after his junior year, he drove back to the school from Geneva in his Lambo, probably just because he could do it outside the school year. On his way up the mountain, The road is like an endless series of hairpin turns. He managed to flip his Lambo into a vineyard while trying to navigate one of those hairpin turns. I'm guessing a Lambo has a lot of power and he took it too hard. His parents, furious at what he had done, decided to punish him by replacing his Lambo with a Porsche. The prince was so angry. He complained about it bitterly when the school year started up again. The rest of us kinda just looked at each other in amazement. Same planet, different worlds, I guess. Story 16. I knew one who apparently couldn't fathom how people live on a budget. We used to hang out a lot at her insistence, but she liked to eat at expensive places, whereas I would have no issues having my meals somewhere cheaper. However, she kept pouting and insisting I stay. I said I couldn't unless she wanted to spot me. She didn't. I then walked her through the math and showed her the cost of my meals with her every day totaled my entire wage for the month. She didn't stop pouting, but from then on I could eat by myself in peace. Story 17. I'm trying to be a better man and not take delight in anyone's misfortune. But rich kid in my high school totaled his pickup truck. Got upset when parents wouldn't replace it, so purposefully crashed his twin brother's pickup, cause if he couldn't have one, neither could he. Not to mention all the legal stuff that I'm sure was the fallout from doing that. Anyway, kid disappeared. I assumed he went to jail or some equivalent. Found out recently that no, he didn't actually. His parents literally disowned him. Like with paperwork and everything, and sent him on his way to fend for himself. I have no idea how life turned out for him. Story 18. Guy from my robotics group had his entire life handed to him. His dad was stupid rich. Because his dad bought shares in an oil field that turned out to have 40x the expected yield, making his $100,000 investment become around $3 million. Then he dumped that into real estate rentals. He decided it would be fun to go to a school trip in Philly acting rich as hell. He drove his lifted modded SUV to a school we were doing a robotics event at in North Philly, talking to younger kids about how it's fun and their school has started offering it. Then we're going to the Franklin Institute from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., then a Phantoms hockey game. Well, 9:30 rolls around and we leave the school to see our bus driver talking to cops. 5 kids drove themselves down. Guess which car was stolen? His $90,000 monstrosity was missing. And after 2 months, all that was ever recovered was his stereo from a pawn shop and his laptop. Best frickin' part? He didn't have insurance on it yet, because he can just buy the other person's car if there's an accident. Anyway, I'd win the fight. His dad flipped out over it and cut his allowance to $200 a month and forced him to drive a beater till he saved up his own money. Story 19. One of my college roommates was very rich growing up. I didn't realize how rich until I had to explain to her what a coupon was in very extensive detail. On multiple occasions, she bragged that she wasn't even interested in her major, philosophy, or college in general, but she was at uni because her parents were requiring her to get a degree, any degree, in order to access her trust fund. I don't remember ever seeing her go to class, and she eventually got expelled sophomore year over academic dishonesty. I guess that was the last straw for her parents because they cut her off pretty soon after that. This actually served as a wake-up call. She somehow managed to get a public health degree at a different school in spite of the academic dishonesty listed on her transcription. She's doing pretty well for herself these days. We've kept in touch, and last we talked, she was considering grad school. Story 20. Rich, scummy injury lawyer's kid was in my class in high school. Goes to college, mid-sized school in the Midwest, and gets plastered drunk. Parents bought him and his friends alcohol since freshman year, so nothing new. And RA says he has to write him up for alcohol in the dorms. Punches 2 RAs, then gets cops called on him and knocks a cop's tooth out. Long story short, his parents have to drive back 6 to 7 hours after 1 day to get him, and he's not even allowed to leave the state until his hearing. Last I heard, he's working at a fast food establishment. Story 21. In a country with high alcohol taxation, rich kids enter a pub, like 10 to 12 of them, throw a card at the bartender demanding shots. What would y'all like? Whatever, lol, dad is paying. Bartender pours double JW Blues for all the brats and some randoms that they treated. Brat with the card had tears in his eyes when the tab came in. Dad's gonna kill me. I did enjoy the free whiskey though. Story 22. This is not the best, as it's pretty sad and frankly undeserved, but a good example of the question asked. I went to a very expensive private elementary school. A friend of mine grew up very wealthy, her father a surgeon and mother a stay-at-home wife. They were very controlling of her and, quite honestly, a little scary. They sheltered her to the extreme, and she frequently repeated insane things they said verbatim because that was all she knew. If she was told to clean her room but left an item out upon her parents' inspection, they would throw it out, no matter what. Once it was something very sentimental to her, can't remember what it was. And when she told me, I expressed sympathy. She said something like, "Oh no, it's okay, it's my fault. if I told my children to clean their rooms, but they didn't and had their friends come over, their friends would go home and tell their parents about how much of a slob my family isn't. That can't happen. This was her concern at 10 years old. When it came time for college, they sent her to an expensive, hard-to-get-into school and told her that her sole purpose there was to find a husband, specifically a doctor or engineer, to keep her as a stay-at-home wife. She flat out told me this was her only purpose, which broke my heart, because she is a smart person who was able to get into said school to begin with, and her parents should have been encouraging different goals for her. Well, she found a boyfriend, but at the end of her 4 years of undergrad, he turned out to be a cheating, narcissistic jerk. The narcissistic jerk part was obvious to me from the get-go, but she had no idea what a healthy relationship looked like. However, the cheating was obvious enough to be a deal breaker. So instead of going straight to marriage, which disappointed her parents and they kicked her out of the house, she suddenly had to become solely independent, find a job in an apartment, and is doing well for herself. She's a totally different person now and has really come a long way. Story 23. Saw a college guy with a ridiculously expensive car, can't remember the model, rear-end this woman who drove an absolute beater. Her car was definitely totaled and his wasn't looking that hot either. He got out and started screaming at this woman. She was in tears, and he kept telling her that she was going to pay for it. When the cops came, I saw each of them give their statements. After that, me and like 10 other people came forward and gave our witness statements. It sounded like each and every one of us put complete fault on him, which was the truth. When the cops went back to him, I saw his face just sink. He probably told them it was her fault and just found out that 2 handfuls of people just confirmed that he's full of crap. I've never seen that many witnesses stick around for a simple traffic accident. I think the other people felt the same way I did. That kid was a jerk and should be punished for what he did. Story 24. I saw Justin Bieber throw a fit and end up not getting what he wanted. We have quarterly team building exercises at my company where you basically go and play mini golf or some other activity capped at $24 per person. Sometime between 2009 and 2011, I really can't remember exactly, my group just decided to go to a fancy lunch in downtown Portland. After lunch, we took one of our coworkers to the semi-famous Nike store, which was a couple of blocks away. And that was the day Justin Bieber happened to show up. When he and his entourage arrived, he said something somewhat loudly along the lines of, "Y'all are gonna have to leave for a bit because I'm here to do some shopping." And some of his people acted like they were going to try and politely force the already present customers out of the store so that Bieber could shop alone. But the Nike employees even more politely told him that was not possible. At that point, Bieber lost it. Threw a total temper tantrum because they couldn't shut down the store for him. The tantrum didn't work and he and his folks left in a huff. That's really my only celebrity in the wild encounter and it's freaking lame. So at this point, I think Justin Bieber would have been like 15 or 17, I think. I looked it up. So I don't know. Part of me wants to say it's not really that unreasonable because he was raised with this weird expectation about him of like being a celebrity. Because he was discovered when he was pretty young, I think. So he was essentially groomed to become a celebrity. And I don't mean that in the really weird, bad way of grooming. Just like in general, he was kind of molded to be a celebrity. And with that, he was probably taught to act a certain way, and this might be part of that. At their very core, celebrities are people too, so when things like this happen, I still try to think of why they ended up like this. But I'm also fully willing to admit that Justin Bieber might just be a spoiled brat. Who knows?